Um, Welcome to session 14 of Epidemics of Injustice. If you feel comfortable, please share your name and pronouns in the chat. Next slide, please. You could visit this QR code to our class website. Next slide. I'll also put the link in the chat. And this is our course information where we've been asking the question, what is the possible world we want to see built during this semester? And you could visit the syllabus, course objectives, all of that. Next slide. So also on our website are some classroom reminders, such as the land acknowledgement, content warning, and other technical information, such as Zoom controls. Next slide, please. We also want to take a moment to announce our post-class evaluation survey. I'll share that link in the chat as well, or you could scan this QR code. We greatly value your feedback, and we want the course to reflect what US students and community member students are looking to learn, and we hope to improve the class in the future. Next slide, please. So today we have Dr. Ford facilitating class. Dr. Ford is an assistant professor in the Community Health Sciences Division at the UIC School of Public Health. Her research explores how anti-Black structural racism operates via policy, governance, and social norms to unequally distribute the resources that contribute to subjective well-being. Specifically, Dr. Ford is interested in place-based policy and practice interventions to support health status, financial security, and social support and relationships, three core determinants of subjective well-being for people racialized as Black. She is the director of the Black Feminist Policy Lab at UIC, an abolitionist, queer, Black feminist learning community that centers love, equity, and truth in the development of a policy agenda to support people racialized as Black in the US. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Ford.
Thank you, Katie. Hold on now. I've got the spotlight on. I want to go on gallery view. There it is. So I don't have slides for today. I'm going to be talking to y'all like this. I'm going to be dropping stuff in the chat. And there's going to be a few times when I share my screen, but for the most part, this is how I plan to do it. And so I'm saying that because I'm hoping that some of you are in a situation where your surroundings allow you to come on camera and potentially come off mute and talk during our discussion today. We are now how many years in? 4 years into this virtual communication life. And as much as we kind of hate it when people try to force us to be on camera, I know that we also are sometimes in situations where it's like, yeah, the vibe would be much better if more people would turn their camera on. So shout out to you, Annie. Thank you for turning your camera on. I'm trying to scroll through and see other folks. Hey, Jenny, thanks for turning your camera on. And some of you all might not be in a situation right now. Hey, Jeanette, some of you all might not be in a situation right now where you can turn your camera on, but I hope that over the course of the next almost 2 hours that we have together, that you all will be like, you know what? It's about that time. So, okay, I have been here on this journey with you all semester. I have, just like y'all, been attending these classes, and all of everything that we've covered so far, I think, has brought us to at least one key point, which is we got to work together to do some stuff, right? Like I think that feels like a key point that I have landed at. And so what my lecture and our discussion is about today is just that, working together on purpose. And as I was preparing for our lecture and our discussion today, what I did was I reread chapter 5 of Mutual Aid by Dean Spade. So I don't know how many of you all have seen or heard of this book here. I'm gonna drop a link in the chat. I highly recommend this book. But I first read this book in spring 2023 when I agreed to take on the role of faculty advisor for Radical Public Health, which y'all have heard about plenty over the course of the semester. Hi, Hannah, thanks for coming on camera. And so I'm dropping the link also to Radical Public Health's page at UIC and their Instagram page, just so you all can check out the organization. But I felt like when I took on this role as the faculty advisor for Radical Public Health, I really was taking on a responsibility to support the structure and sustainability of the organization. And, you know, since being created in 2012, RPH has always maintained a non-hierarchical leadership structure. That's like a key aspect of the organization. To me, that leadership structure is one of the best parts of the organization. But it also has been one of the most difficult parts of the organization. And so for me, it was my efforts to figure out how we could address that difficulty that led me to this book. And honestly, it was me trying to figure that out and everything that I learned through reading this book that led me to this lecture. So today I want us to spend time talking about working together joyfully on purpose. Working together joyfully on purpose, right? This is important. And like I started off saying, like it's important because we know that we need to act. Like all of these previous weeks have made that clear to us. Like we must engage in praxis. And I'm putting in the chat, when I say praxis, this is what I mean. We must engage in praxis. And our collective work in building the possible world that we want to see is probably going to require us to work in groups. So why would we not do that joyfully, right? Like that's how I like to think about it. So to open us up in this conversation today, I am going to share my screen and I'm going to read a little bit and I'm going to ask some brave souls out there to also read a little bit with me. Okay, can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Cool beans. What can y'all see now?
Same thing.
Still my screen?
Mhm.
Still the chapter? Wonderful. Okay. This is a learning curve for me because I am adjusting to using one screen instead of two. But okay, chapter 5 of Mutual Aid begins like this. One downside to the urgency that we bring to our mutual aid work can be that we dive right into the work, very concerned about how many people our project is helping, but fail to create good internal practices for our group to be strong and sustainable. Now, can I have someone volunteer to come off mute and read until that slash in there?
It makes sense that we are not good at creating emancipatory group structures. Most of us have never been in groups that had fair, participatory, transparent structures.
Yeah. Thank you for reading. Can someone else come off mute and read until the end of the paragraph?
We've been working at jobs where bosses tell us what to do, or been in schools, families, state institutions, or churches where strong hierarchies rule and most people get no say in how things will go. We do not have much practice imagining or being in groups where everyone can truly participate in decision making.
Thank you. So, what that passage tells us is that it can be hard to work together joyfully in groups because our current society just like isn't even built like that. Working together joyfully might not be something that many of us have even experienced before. So it makes sense that it's hard for us to try to create that in the group work that we do. But that's okay though, because there was a time when all of you all here did not know how to tie your shoes. There was a time when all of you all here did not know how to log into a Zoom call. So just like all of those things, we can learn to work together joyfully on purpose. And I see a couple more folks have joined us on camera. It's nice to see you all's faces. Thank you. So, okay, there are some key aspects to working together joyfully on purpose. I am going to put them in the chat right now. And the first key aspect that we're going to talk about today is group culture. And so to get us thinking and talking about this, I want to ask you all to think about a group that you're currently a part of or that you maybe were recently a part of. I'm waiting for you all to get a group in mind. Once you have a group in mind, let me know in the chat. Think about a group that you're currently a part of or like recently were a part of. Come on. I'm gonna wait for a few more people to say that they have a group in mind. Okay, Howard's getting real specific with it. Okay, okay, we've got some examples. Okay, so have that group in your mind. I didn't hear from everyone in the chat, but I'm hoping that at least most of you all have a group in mind. Okay, now I want you all to think about how you would describe the culture of that group. Think about how you would describe the culture of that group. And just by like a nod of heads or maybe a little something in the chat, is anybody struggling to think of like a description of how they would describe the culture of the group? Okay, I already see some stuff in the chat. So, okay, in case you're struggling to think of how you would describe the culture of a group, I want you to consider these indicators. How does the group act towards new folks? What are the norms that the group actually follows? What do the meetings feel like? How do you all celebrate together? How does small talk go? How do you all give feedback to one another? I'm gonna put these indicators in the chat, but I want you all to just think a bit more about those questions. Hold on, let me put them in the chat. I want you all to think a bit more about those questions. And then when you're ready, I want to invite you all to please come off mute and share. And you don't have to name the group just in case it might get a little spicy, but you can just describe the culture of the group.
We just volunteer to go for it.
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, here's a group I helped start because there was nothing like it. And this is a group of men who all have one thing in common. They have prostate cancer. Turns out there's a spectrum with prostate cancer. There's very low risk, And then there's aggressive, deadly cancer. They call it the sleeping lion versus the snarling tiger. And the chemistry between these two extremes is not good because the experiences between these two different sides of the disease are not the same. And a lot of the low risk men drop out because they're fearful of what they hear about the treatment. So I helped start actually two groups, one for North America and one internationally. And here's what we do. How does
Well,
the
let me
group?
pause you, Howard, because
Yeah,
I want to hear less about the work that you all do, and I want to hear more about you all's group culture. Like,
yeah,
talk to me about how do you all treat new people that join the group?
yeah. I was just going to get to that.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, the all new people go first. You know, they introduce themselves, they explain why they're there, and and then the group responds to them. And so I'd say it's a welcoming group. What are the norms? Well, you, you know, you don't put anybody down. Everybody speaks their mind. Let's see, what do they feel like? Well, to be honest, it depends who's running the meeting. If I'm running the meeting, it's generally pretty light. If the founder of the parent organization shows up, everybody gets uptight because he's super aggressive and gets a little bit nasty and is always right.
So it
Uh,
sounds like what you're saying, Howard, is you've noticed in your group that the facilitator really matters a lot in terms of like maintaining the group culture, like the
oh,
meeting facilitator.
yeah, I mean, people get uptight depending on who's running the meeting.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Howard. I would love to hear from some other folks who have a group in mind and can share about the culture in their group.
I have a group in mind. And I
Mhm.
won't tell you the name of the group, but I'll start off. How does the group act towards new people? Um, Nonchalant, because usually the new person is chosen by the leader. And so you already know where that person fit in at. So you better not say anything positive or negative. You just kind of sit there and nod your head.
Mhm.
What are the norms that the group follow actually? Again, you know that it's not an open sharing. You can say all day long that it's a how did they put it? A non-judgmental whatever group, and you know from previous experiences that's not the case. What do the meetings feel like? It's very tense, what I feel for everybody, and you're just trying to hurry up and get off of the call. You know, it makes it where you can't really accomplish anything.
Yeah.
How you celebrate together? Oh, please, we're never gonna get together. I'm not gonna put myself into that kind of drama. You know, how does small talk? We don't have small talk because you can tell you might have one or two that talk to each other, but for us, the whole group, we really, you know, it's that thing about forming groups, forming teams, forming and everything. We've been storming from day one, meaning that nobody says anything because you don't know how to form a group. You have to be able to treat each other with respect, and that's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you give feedback to one another? You don't. You bet not. Because you're going to feel attacked. And I see it a lot, mainly with a lot of my younger colleagues, because again, it's in their work environment and they're looking at being the person that's targeted and it's their career. So no, it's not a very good situation. So my response to all of that is find somewhere else to go.
Yeah, I feel like I just heard you say a lot of things that are really important and that we're gonna touch on more like as we keep talking. But core to what you just said about that group culture, Tamara, is this like not enjoyable group culture basically means that you all struggle to get the work done. So, you know, like that just feels like a key takeaway. If you all take nothing else away from this conversation today, take away that joy is not some extra razzle dazzle that we add on to the top just for fun. Like, we choose joy in our work together so that we can do work together, right? Like that, like joy is an intentional act of choice so that we can continue to do this work together. I'm wondering if anyone else wants to share a bit about a group culture that they have in mind. If not, we can move forward and look at some general qualities of group cultures.
I can go.
Yeah.
So the group that I'm thinking of, like looking at especially the last two questions, like I feel like small talk generally goes pretty well. Feedback, it really depends who is providing it and who is receiving it, for how that goes. I feel like in general, some of the norms are affected when there's like a competitive element. So I think that that can like tilt things if there's, I don't know, if there's something that only X number of people in the group can be a part of or something. I think that kind of adds some interesting undercurrents and can like kind of shake things up. Like I feel like a lot of our norms can get thrown off if there's either someone missing or kind of additional people. So I feel like a lot of, yeah, the group's culture can really shift if key individuals aren't present, which I guess is kind of what Howard said as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm about to share my screen again. And I want you all to look at this chart. This is chart 4 from chapter 5 of mutual aid. And I'm wondering if anyone who, came off mute to share about the group culture that they had in mind, or even anyone who didn't come off mute, but just was kind of thinking in their head. I'm wondering if you all see anything on this chart that like maybe you've experienced before. It could be helpful or harmful. I know that I heard Tambra talk a bit about the group culture of the group that she described being like not so warm to new members because they knew how that person got added to the group and maybe weren't such a fan of it. But
Yeah, I can go on either side of this because I have actually worked with some really, really good groups. And then I pointed out one, so it kind of helped with this whole group culture thing and talking about it and how to make it better. I mean, I've worked with group where we respected each other. Everybody brought something to the table. I mean, it was valuable. We actually got the top award in the organization. It was fun. We didn't celebrate together as far as going to each other's houses, but every Friday we may have had pizza and things like that. But the other group has none of these characteristics. But again, it's depending on who's in the group, right? Who is really, in the group and how you feel. I mean, if you feel threatened. And I think that's a lot of it is they're feeling threatened.
And I heard someone else come off mute and start talking at the same time. Was that you, Rashida? Sorry.
It was. Looking at this is interesting. I had a couple of groups in mind. Interestingly enough, from the same organization. And the groups are like night and day. The only thing that they had in common is they're very welcoming to new people, because I was always the new person. But they're like night and day. Like one is completely on the left side and one is on the right side. And it's such a stark difference where when I left the group on the right, like when I see members now I'm in the group on the left. So when I see members in the group on the right in the hallway, they're always like, you don't have to smile so hard. Like, you don't have to be so happy. Like, you don't have to be so excited. Like, it's obvious that there was a culture shift from one to the other.
Yeah. How many of us have been in groups where we felt like people were just like overworking and like perfectionists, and we're like experiencing this like martyrdom where they're like, I'm gonna get it done regardless of what it takes. even if I fall out, it's gonna be done. Like, how many of us have experienced that? I see a few people nodding their heads. Yeah, you can come up mute, Jenny, please.
No, I'm raising my hand that.
Oh, as in like you've experienced that. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, but you know, I know for me, when I first saw that chart, I was like, like I felt it, you know, because similar to you all who were nodding your heads, like that, so many of the things that we saw on the harmful list of group culture, like, you know, aspects, so much of that is, for many of us, kind of the norm of what we experience when we're working in groups. And so I thought that was an interesting chart to share. And just real quick, I want to say that for those of you who are on camera, I don't know if y'all know this, I'm kind of new to this, but you can move everybody's faces, all the like camera faces all together. So I'm looking at you all as a cluster of faces right now. And it is very exciting and joyful for me because I can actually see y'all nodding your heads and everything. So I invite you all to cluster the faces. All right. So yes, and I see you in the chat, Rashida, saying that you're gonna order this book. Like, I highly recommend. Okay. The next key aspect that we're gonna discuss is communication and shared decision making. So, you know, groups that value all members equally in theory and in practice use tools like consensus-based decision making to make decisions together. And according to Dean Spade, consensus-based decision-making is based on the idea that everyone should have a say in decisions that affect them. In consensus-based decision-making, every group member has the power to block a decision from moving forward. This shared power encourages us to all do a better job of communicating with each other in a group because we literally can't move forward without each other. So it means that we have to actually take the time to talk through our group members' concerns. We have to be committed to discussing the many possibilities and modifying a proposal until we all feel comfortable moving forward. So it is the sort of process that takes longer, but gets us to a place that we can all feel comfortable with. And Katie, I see you said in the chat that you're eating your dinner. I wondered, does that mean you're not going to be able to put chart 5 in the chat?
No, I can do that still.
Okay, thank you. I'm like, ruh-roh. So if you could go ahead and drop that in the chat, and what Katie is about to share are the basic steps to consensus decision making. And I'm not going to talk about this chart, but I'll just like say the steps out loud. So the way that Dean Spade lays it out in the book is, you know, step 1, discussion. Step 2, identify emerging proposal. Step 3, identify any unsatisfied concerns. Step 4, collaboratively modify the proposal. Step 5, assess the degree of support. And step 6, finalize the decision or circle back to steps 1 through 3. So you either are finalizing the decision or you're kind of taking this loop and going back to the beginning and you're discussing, you're identifying a proposal, etc. So this is just like laid out sort of the basic steps to consensus-based decision-making. So yeah, I mean, group discussion, it leads the group to an initial proposal. The proposal is further discussed. The concerns are brought forward. Everyone has the opportunity to share their concerns for them to be considered. The group works together to modify the proposal until the group has a version that everyone can live with. So I think what's interesting to me about the idea of consensus-based decision-making is like, think about like your friends or like maybe your partner or something, and y'all are trying to decide on a movie to go see or like dinner or something. Like in that sort of, you know, joyful relationship, you all might engage in this shared, like, consensus-based decision-making process, right? You all might throw out some ideas. You want pizza, you want Chinese food. I just had pizza last week. I don't really think I want pizza. I might be down for Chinese food, but the closest place might be too far. Like, and then you might be like, oh, well, what about that Thai food spot down the street? Like, we haven't tried that one out. Ooh, okay, maybe we can do that. And then you all come to a place that you agree with and you go forward. So you all both brought forward proposals, you all discussed your concerns, and you all made a decision together. And so when it comes to consensus-based decision making, all we're talking about is taking these sort of joyful, you know, decision-making practices that we might have in different aspects of our lives and taking it and plopping it in a different context, like in a context where we might be, you know, doing work together. So I am now going to share my screen because I'm going to play a snippet from a video that most of you may have seen already. It's from our People's Budget demo video. But I think I'm playing a snippet that you all haven't seen yet, where the group is making community agreements. And I'm sharing this because I want you all to see this group decision-making process in action through the development of community agreements. So let me get this together. Sound and share. And it's gonna work because it is. I want to see a thumbs up if you all can hear it.
Yeah, for you all to feel like this is a space where you're able to share your opinion without being like judged, making sure that everyone feels heard, and also making sure that we are holding each other accountable as we're having this conversation moving along. And that the conversation is really fruitful and you all have, most importantly, fun at the end of this. And I could give an example and then you all could add on to it. So one example I like to use is one diva, one mic. So for me, it means when one person's talking, folks are listening and paying attention. How does that sound for you all?
That sounds great.
That sounds good. So one thing that we're going to be doing also when we're talking collectively and coming to a consensus, if that sounds good, can I see you do a thumbs up? Awesome. So one diva, one mic. How's that sound? All right. So I'm gonna write it down. There's gonna be our little board right here. Does anyone have any other ones that they would like to share or add on to our agreements?
I would say maybe like make space, take space. Like if you feel like you're taking up a lot of space, maybe step back. And then if you feel like maybe you're not engaging enough, like encouraging yourself to step forward and add a little bit.
How does that feel? Thumbs up? So take space, make space.
I think maybe something like there's no such thing as a bad idea. So kind of like you said, we all come from different like places and experiences. And so just recognizing that you could just say whatever you think and like we all will talk about it and know that like you didn't have a bad idea. Like it's all for discussion for real.
How do you like that? Thumbs up. Awesome. So no bad ideas. So we have one diva, one mic, take space, make space, no bad ideas. Any other agreements y'all want to add?
Sounds good.
Does that sound good? Yeah. This is a working document. We could add on to it. We could take things off of it as we're going along. Sounds good? Awesome. Thumbs up? All right. Thank you.
Hey, okay. Thank you all for watching that with me. So what did you all notice in that decision-making process?
Well, they affirmed each other's recommendations, or what everybody had buy-in. They endorsed what she had to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they had a symbol for their agreement as well, right? So like for this one, they had a thumbs up. I've seen consensus-based decision-making processes where there are different types of like hand signals. So I usually use like what's called a fist to 5 activity to like vote on things. I see you nodding, so you're familiar with that activity. There are different ways to do it, but you know, for consensus-based decision making to work well, you really need a few things. So thing number one, the group needs a common purpose, and thing number two, people need to trust each other. 3, people need to understand the process that you all are using to make decisions. So we talked about the thumbs up. So like it needed to be communicated that like, that's what we're doing to communicate our consent to accept this group norm. Because consensus-based decision-making takes a bit longer, like we talked about earlier, you all need to have time and patience for the process. That also is a very important aspect of consensus-based decision-making. And finally, the groups involved need to be willing to center the best interests of the group. Now, I do want to pause and say more about this, because in that chart we looked at before, remember we were talking about martyrdom, and we were talking about like, I'm gonna do it no matter what. That's not what I'm talking about here when I say needing to put the best interest of the group at the center. I don't mean that people need to expect to be harmed by the decisions of the group, or that people need to sacrifice themselves for the good of the group. What I mean by, you know, putting the best interest of the group at the center, I mean that people should be okay with not getting their way 100, their number one way 100% of the time, right? Like, so they're willing to be flexible for the sake of the larger purpose of the group. I just want to reiterate that when it comes to working together joyfully on purpose, the behavior of individuals in the group sacrificing themselves is not sustainable. It is not joyful. It erodes the culture of the group. So that is not an activity that we should be leaning into if we are trying to work together joyfully and on purpose. And then exactly, people become resentful, then it starts to, you know, permeate the group potentially. It can cause, it could be a source of conflict within the group. And then finally, for consensus decision-making to work well, you need a good facilitator and a clear agenda to guide the discussion. And, you know, Howard kicked us off earlier talking about the importance of the facilitator in getting a group to work well together. So I'm wondering if anyone has any reflections or questions about communication and shared decision-making before we move on to the next aspect of working together joyfully on purpose.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What if the facilitator sucks? Can you kick him out, kick her out?
That's hilarious. So I would say, so I mean, the short answer is kind of yes, kind of no, right? So what I'll talk more about later is working together joyfully and on purpose involves the facilitator shifting. You shouldn't have the same facilitator all the time, because a part of being in a group that views everyone as equals and has balances of power means that there's not one person that always is the facilitator. Like when you have a consistent facilitator, that person's the boss. You know what I mean? That person's the lead of the thing. But if you all are trying to not have those sort of roles and you all are trying to shift and you know, step up and step back, then you don't necessarily have that issue. I think that what you might be getting at potentially is a desire to build the capacity of everyone in your team to be a good facilitator. And that feels like a part of communication, right? Like that feels like where group culture and communication come together, because you got to give feedback. You have to give constructive feedback. And we'll talk more about that later, but that's a funny question. Okay, we've got some stuff in the chat I would like to pause and read. I'd like to highlight the idea, this is from Elijah. I'd like to highlight the idea that these agreements are not set in stone and some can be added and subtracted through the process. Absolutely. Reminded me of the beginning of Jenny's class, CHSC 594. Yeah, 594, where we talked it out and she gave us some examples of how to do this in community engaged / community-based research. Absolutely. Thank you for highlighting that, Elijah. And that's something that the facilitator in the video said, but that I didn't reiterate, is that like these community agreements are not set in stone. They might shift as the needs of the group shift over time. And being welcoming to that and like, you know, open to that, I think is a part of working together joyfully on purpose, because I think that it demonstrates that you're not being so like strict and rigid, like, we wrote the rules down and that's what it's gonna be. Like, we don't have to act like that. That is not required. That might be the culture of the society that we find ourselves in, but that doesn't have to be the culture that you create and replicate within the group that you decide to be a part of. So thanks for lifting that up, Elijah. All right, let's talk about the third key aspect of working together joyfully on purpose. Yeah, Emily, are you about to say take a break?
I was gonna say, maybe before we go into this section.
Okay, I
should we
had
take
it written down to take a 5-minute break here, but I was like, maybe we don't need to, but wonderful. Okay, great.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, everyone. We'll come back at 6:24.
Okay.
I'll put it on the screen. Thank you, thank you.
Okay, welcome back, y'all. I again want to invite you all onto the camera if you are willing and able. I would love to see some faces, some eyeballs looking back at me. Makes me feel less alone in this Zoom room with all of these squares of names. No, I'm just kidding. I appreciate all of you for being here. And where we left off was getting into the third key aspect of working together joyfully on purpose. And the third key aspect is administrative processes and tools. So this key aspect is concerned with the nitty-gritty of how you all do the work together. So, you know, this is where you think about questions like, do you all want to work in a big old group? Or do you want to break into smaller teams that are responsible for specific short or long-term projects? If you all choose to go the teams approach, those teams are the ones who will really be moving forward with the work of the project. And then they would report back to the larger group for input on proposals or for large group decision-making. But what about this, right? Like, if the group chooses to do work in smaller teams, how do people know which decisions can be made in the small groups and which decisions need to be brought to the full group? What do y'all think? I'll ask the question again. If the group chooses to do work in smaller teams, how do people know which decisions can be made in the small group and which need to be brought to the full group?
I think like looking at who the decision impacts.
Mm-hmm.
So, or I'm just thinking like I work in a hospital, and when I work on processes and break down the team, it's who touches the process at that stage, or like who has to deal with the outcome or the output of that stage. Because yeah, otherwise meetings have 30 people on them every time.
So are you saying, Annie, that if there's a decision where you can ensure that the whole, like every aspect from kind of start to finish of that decision is going to remain within that team, it's not going to involve anyone else in the group, then that's a decision that the team can make. But if at some point it might impact other folks in other teams, then that's the kind of decision that needs to be made in a big group. That's what you would say.
That's the aim. I think sometimes decisions get made in smaller groups and you might like pull in people after
Mhm.
the fact, but I think like trying to keep it with just the people that it actually impacts or like that are actually doing the work.
Yeah. Katie, I saw you say in the chat, that's a tough one.
It is, because I don't think it's anything you do that don't impact somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's something my mom always said. Yeah, you can go out there and do something crazy, but it's going to impact this whole family. So I think that's something that's very difficult to answer. And usually the safe way to go is just, hey, if you got a real small group, 3 or 4 people, why not just ask them? And if they got their input, fine. If they don't, still fine, because I don't think it's just going to impact one person. I
Yeah.
can't think of a situation, but maybe you guys can.
Katie, can you put chart 6 in the chat? So it's funny because I almost felt like you all were answering as if there was an answer. And the truth is that your group, it's up to your group to decide. And also the truth is that it depends on what sort of decision you're talking about. So in the chapter, Dean Spade suggests developing and using decision-making protocols so that all members of the group can answer this question in the same way. This question of what decisions can we make as a small team versus what decisions need to be brought to the full group. So Katie put a link in the chat. So I just want to invite you all to open it up and take a look at it. Now, Dean Spade only mentions 2 types of decisions, like as examples, but you all in your group might consider a range of like decision types that fit the context of you all's work. So they have an example here for, the decision to add a new weekday for deliveries. So this is an organization that they're doing mutual aid work and they're delivering food to neighbors. And so if the decision comes to add a new weekday for deliveries, then they have all of these different categories. So they've got the decision type or the sort of decision. They've got who initiates this decision-making process, who needs to be consulted for this decision-making process, who can finalize the decision, and who needs to be informed and how. So as you can see here, there's both the decision-making process and like how that goes, who all is consulted in that decision-making. And then this final column shows how they're thinking about communication and like communicating with the full group, even if those folks weren't active in the decision-making. Yep, Rashida.
This is hilarious because we literally just had this exact situation on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So there is a work group that's tasked with an objective to do a thing, right? So the work group was presented with all the criteria and information they needed over the course of 4 meetings, 4 weeks. They did what they were tasked to do and they made a decision. And so we were like, okay, cool. Yep, that's the decision, right? Like that was our understanding of the situation. So then when we took it back to oversight committee, it was like all excited, like, yay, we got this task completed and this is what it is. They were like, yeah, not so bad. We're like, what? Like, and they were like, they never once indicated that they needed some sort of sign off. And so we were all in the meeting, like scratching our head, like, what? Like, you tasked this work group with doing the thing, they did the thing, and here is the thing. Now you all are saying we should have presented it different.
Yeah.
So we're actually gonna have a whole nother meeting about how that is supposed to go down. So this is like pretty timely because they kind of threw us for a loop. Like this is what it says they're supposed to do, but apparently
Yeah.
they
So it
wanted
sounds like,
some
sorry.
input to be able to put some input into it. I don't know, because it was like almost the end of the meeting when it came up. So we're going to discuss it in the next meeting. So it'd be interesting to see, but literally the same
Yeah, it
scenario.
sounds like a tool like this in advance would have been
Yeah.
helpful for that group.
Very helpful. Yes.
I'm curious though, if you would be willing to share, how did it make you feel to like get that feedback, for you all to have like done the work, made a decision that you all in the small group felt good about on the work that you all felt like you were tasked to carry out, and then to like come to the big group and them to be like, oh, like, how did that make you feel?
So it wasn't, so I'm the facilitator, so it wasn't my decision. Like, even though I facilitate the work group, I'm not part of the work group. It's their decision that I had to take back to oversight, right? Where my team had to take back to oversight. So there's a work group, there's our team, and then there's oversight. And we're kind of like the liaison between. So I did feel some kind of way, because the thing is, we actually sort of asked the question before. And they kind of gave us this like vague answer, like it's led by the people, it's the community, it's this, right? And like, y'all didn't really mean that, did y'all? So that was interesting. I think if the work group heard that, yeah, we were just giving them the side eye, like, okay, so this is not what you said, but it was interesting. Like, okay, we need some sort of protocol, like it's on the agenda for the next meeting that we need to, I'm gonna borrow this, for the next meeting, read it up before Tuesday. Yeah, we
Yeah.
always ask them. So if the decisions that come out of the work groups, the recommendations, decisions, are those what it is? And they were like, that's their objective, that's their job. So it was interesting to get that pushback from them, like, hold up, wait a minute.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing your response to my question of, how did it make you feel, or maybe how did it make some of the other folks involved feel, I feel like I hear you saying that you felt a little bamboozled. You
That
felt
part.
like things were unclear, like they weren't clearly communicating processes and expectations.
Because we asked the question, like we asked it and they skirted around it. They didn't want to say, we get final sign off or approval, but they should have just said it. Like, say it with your chest. Like, say the thing, call the thing a thing. They should have said that. They didn't say it. They kind of skirted around it until they actually had to say it. So that was definitely interesting.
And enough of those kind of experiences end up being adding up to a point where it makes someone want to leave the group, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe if this is your paid work, maybe that's not an option, but at the very least, it makes you want to mentally check out. It makes you not want to be an active participant in the group process. And that was something as clear as not developing protocols up front, not clearly communicating processes and expectations and norms. So that's that. Thank you for sharing that experience, because I think it just helps us to really see like why these kind of like little basic administrative type tasks are so important. And I will just say, like, this aspect of working together joyfully on purpose is my favorite aspect. I am the clear communications girly for sure. Like, I love that, because I think it's so important. And speaking of protocol, the group could also consider developing some sort of a template to guide the development of proposals that the group will like discuss and decide upon. So can you, Katie, did I send you the proposal template? Can you put that in the chat, please? And if you all will take a look at the proposal template in the chat, one question that's on here that I want to lift up, because we were talking about it earlier, is what teams within the larger group might this proposal involve? And do I need to run this proposal by any of them before bringing it to the whole group? And so just returning to the point that that Annie was discussing earlier, like, and also that Tambra, weighed in on, like, rarely do our activities in a group actually remain specifically within a small team. There's usually some kind of swirling out that's going to bring other people in. And so we need to check with our group members to make sure that their plate is not going to overflow when our decision inevitably spills out onto their plate. That is an important aspect of working joyfully together, especially in big groups that are made up of small teams. And then one other question that's on here, the final question that's on this proposal template that I would like to say out loud is there any research that could help flesh out this proposal before people consider it? I will share one of my personal, I'm not gonna call it pet peeves, but one of my personal is when we're having a conversation and trying to get to a decision, but it's clear that there's a bunch of like relatively easy research that needs to be done for us to have an informed conversation. But we knew we were going to talk about this, but we didn't do that bit of like Googling or like pulling up whatever information first. And I think this is something that we likely all struggle with because there are so many things that we're trying to like balance and navigate at a time. But I think having these questions written down in some sort of a template can help to get you ready for group conversations and for group decision making, because you've got a clear proposal that you're bringing forward and you're giving people as much information as you can for them to have an informed discussion and to make an informed decision. So, all right, now we're going to move on to my most favorite part of administrative processes and tools: agendas and meeting facilitation. I love a good agenda. I love a good, well-facilitated meeting. And truthfully, that's because I have ADD. And as a person with ADD, clearly structured agendas are essential to me being able to participate in a meeting, period, let alone my ability to like work with people joyfully. And, actually sticking to that agenda means that I am able to follow the flow of conversation and I can understand what's going on. And I don't know, I feel like I saw a couple little head nods, so I'm curious to know if anyone else has had this experience. Like, has anyone else struggled to participate in meetings because the agenda or the facilitation just like wasn't clear?
I get meeting invites all the time with no context. And I'm like, what is this meeting for? Like, you have to tell me something. I'm not just gonna click this button and show up without any context. So yeah, you spend the first 20 minutes disoriented, trying to figure out like, why am I here? What is this related to? Do I even really need to be here? So yeah, please don't, like, you don't get an RSVP from me with that.
I won't be there.
I'm also a big agenda person. I like being able to see the whole plan. And then also, if we're getting carried away on one topic, being able to say, okay, do we want to move on or do we want to move this to next time, I think is helpful, and having like that record.
Yeah. And so I do like to think of high quality, like clearly communicated agendas and good facilitation. I think of those honestly as like aspects of the meetings that like help to make them more accessible to people whose brains work different and they show up differently to the space. And so they need that sort of like structure in order to be an active participant. So, okay, I am now about to share my screen because I want to show you all an example of an agenda template that makes my brain feel calm and helps to facilitate my ability to participate joyfully. Are you all able to see this? To see the agenda template?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna be quiet for a couple moments. but when you all have had some time to look at it, I would love to hear from you all, just like, what do we think about this agenda?
It's simple.
Yeah, we noticed that it's simple. What about it is helpful? I guess the fact that it's simple, maybe. What about this agenda is helpful?
Like it gives you your expectations. So like introductions and check-in questions, like if a part, someone just said it too, like if a part is running over, like you can recognize that, right? Like we're spending too much time on this part right here. Like your expectations, you know what to expect. Like it's so clear and precise. Even tells you when the next meeting is. Like that's my favorite thing to do. Like it answers the questions, the pertinent questions.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I would change on this, 10
Mhm.
minutes, 5 minutes. I think if you put 10 minutes, if the meeting started 10 minutes late, you're already off. So I would actually put 8 to 8:10, so people know, hey, here's your time period. That's where we are. And then you really will know if you're behind or not. This right here doesn't tell me exactly where I am. It gives me the duration, but not the actual time.
Mm-hmm. So you would, for you in an agenda template, you and your group would like to put actual time, like AM, PM type of time, so that you can see where you're falling. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to do that in addition to duration. What else would we add or subtract from this agenda template to make it more helpful for our groups?
I think we can put like a ice break first, and then continue the agenda, because sometimes we coming from different places and just sitting there, and then we start with the agenda. Maybe take a little time to have ice break and maybe checking in everybody how they doing and all that kind of stuff, and then
Yeah.
start the agenda.
So Dolores, we have here the first item on this agenda is introductions and check-in questions, but it sounds like for you and your group, it would be like more clear to make it say icebreaker, and maybe even to give it a bit more time than just the 10 minutes.
Yes.
So for your group, how much time do you think that an icebreaker would take? Like imagine it's different folks, maybe there's some new people there, some old people who have been around for a while. How much time would you give to the icebreaker?
I we take time like a 5 minutes, yeah, checking and say like how we feeling, or some kind of ice break we put there, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if others have thoughts on what they might add or take away from this agenda to make it more helpful.
I would probably add maybe like a review from the last meeting, like a follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
If this meeting was, a follow-up from the last meeting and what we've accomplished or not accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know depending on like the group and the kind of work, something that I also like to add to the agenda template at the bottom is like key links that just link to like all the documents that we are regularly referencing in our work together, so that people aren't searching through all their everything during the meeting trying to find the document. They can just easily get to it right there. And that keeps people in the space as opposed to everywhere else while they're trying to figure it out. I love what you all have added to this agenda template. And I think that what's important is that we're recognizing that it necessarily will be modified based on the type of work that we're doing together and the needs of our group. And I think, again, like that feels like, you know, a key takeaway from our conversation is like, there are few, I'm not gonna say there are no set rules, but there are very few set strict rules, right? Like we're figuring it out together. And that's a part of the source of the joy, is that we can create processes and templates and systems that work for us, whoever us is. So your group should develop an agenda template that meets you all's own needs. Having a template that is simple and consistent helps the shifting facilitators. So again, shout out to Howard's comment earlier about the facilitator. Ideally, we would be shifting. And when we have a consistent template, it helps the facilitators to develop agendas ahead of the meeting. And it helps the attendees, especially, you know, the neurodivergent group members or the new folks, to follow what's going on and to be able to refer back to it later on. So I'm wondering, Katie, if you can put in the chat best practices for joyful meeting facilitation. Did I send that to you as well? Wonderful. So let's put that in the chat now. Thank you. So I wasn't going to talk through this, but I'm just going to say a few of the points on here, or maybe I'll honestly just say all of them out loud. That's probably what I'm going to do. And then I want to hear from you all if y'all have any thoughts or questions about agendas and facilitation. So the document that Katie put into the chat is titled Best Practices for Joyful Meeting Facilitation. And I'm going to read. The first one on the list, assign a facilitator, note taker, and timekeeper. These roles should rotate. Again, we are not trying to create and then reinforce power hierarchies by giving people these like roles that remain consistent, and then now they're always the person doing that same thing in the group. Like imagine being in a group where the timekeeper never changed. So that means, you know, every week when you show up to these meetings, it's always this one person cutting you off when you're talking, telling you it's time to move on. Eventually you'd be like, bruh, cut it out. You know what I mean? When really that's just their shifting role. They're trying to, you know, play this part for the group. And so we all need to share these responsibilities. Okay, next on here, all attendees should participate in creating a meeting environment that is warm, welcoming, energizing, connected, honest, and joyful. One of my favorite ones on this list, start on time, end on time. There is nothing that will grind my gears like a meeting that goes over time and nobody acknowledges that it's going over time. I literally will be sitting there like, are y'all for real? Like, absolutely not. If your meeting is going to go over time, because it happens sometimes, and sometimes the conversation is so juicy that everyone there is willing for it to go over time. However, you need to acknowledge that your meeting is going over time. You need to give people who are in the space the permission to leave, because that can get awkward if like one or two people feel like they need to head out actually because they really needed this meeting to end on time, but then other folks are staying late. Sometimes you can feel a pressure to stay if that's what we're doing. So pause wherever the conversation is at the time and say, I recognize that we are about to go over time. For those of you who need to leave, thank you so much. Please head out. Like, we will send you the meeting notes. It was wonderful seeing you. And then you can continue the conversation. If that aligns with your group's norms. Your group's norms and group agreements might be, don't you ever go overtime. In which case, you need to be prepared as a meeting facilitator to figure out how you're going to adjust such that the meeting does not go overtime. Another best practice, begin with a check-in question that facilitates relationship building and connection. This question can be fun or reflective, but really it should allow people's personalities to shine. And so this feels related to what Dolores was saying earlier about like doing some sort of an icebreaker or something. Ensure time for introductions if new people may be in the meeting. I think there are few things more awkward than being a new person in a meeting where you're like the new person, like maybe one of two, and everyone else knows each other and no one does intros. And then you're just like, well, who are these people? And they don't even know me. And then don't let the group get started using acronyms and stuff like that. You're just like, I gotta head out because I have no idea what's going on here. So yeah, and introduce people, introduce terms, so that people can feel welcomed into the meeting space. Something that we've already talked about, develop an agenda and share it in advance. But then be willing to modify the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, like leave time for this. So if you saw in the agenda template that we were looking at previously, there were 5 minutes in there for agenda review. If there are too many agenda items for the time that you all have allotted for the meeting, work with the group to decide in advance, as in like before you all actually get started with the meeting. So like during that 5-minute agenda review, decide in advance what can be discussed next time, what of those discussions can be taken to the smaller teams and fleshed out before the next full group meeting, right? Like you have to decide those things in advance because there's just not going to be enough time for all of the things that you all have to discuss. Dedicate a space in the notes for a task list that clarifies action items and the person responsible for them. Assign an amount of time to each agenda item and do your best to stick to that allotted time. Or at the very least, acknowledge and agree as a group that you plan to go over time on a single agenda item. As much as possible, this is also one of my favorites. As much as possible, meetings should have food, drinks, music, art, joy. I love that. I love meetings with food are so important. Snacks are praxis. You must feed people. Well, I'm not gonna say you must feed people. I think it's best practice to feed people personally. Okay, follow group norms or community agreements during the meeting. When talking about important topics, try to make time in the agenda for everyone in attendance to speak or share their thoughts. So when it comes to allocating time in the agenda that you're making, I suggest overestimating rather than really trying to get it exactly right. So if you're pretty confident that a conversation about topic A is going to take 10 minutes, give it 15 at least, because you want to give people space to be in discussion. And finally, assign a person to follow up with new people after the meeting. So these are some best practices. All right, so do we have any questions about agendas and meeting facilitation? Or like thoughts in general, I guess?
I had just a quick thought about the joyful, I guess the goal of having a joyful meeting. I have mixed feelings on that. Just because I know that depending on the context of the meeting and the context of the work that you're doing, there's definitely times when meetings can, will not be joyful, especially if there's something that has occurred, that is something major, either within the organization or within the world, when times are very heavy, and you might have to adjust the agenda very quickly. And kind of like that should always, hopefully, be something that the group, can accomplish, is to kind of bring that joyful energy to the group. But I feel like it's just not always possible for very good reason. And at times, if it's kind of emphasize too much, it might send the wrong message in terms of folks not really being, bringing their genuine and authentic thoughts and selves to the meeting. And I know, for that reason, like when I teach for the College of Social Work as a PhD student, and in my time teaching, what I have found is that the check-in question, which I love to do because it's really great for community building, but it's definitely been a lesson learned for me in terms of how to use the check-in question strategically, because there's times when absolutely, the check-in question could be fun, and I usually do start like the first class with like, some type of a fun question. But as the semester goes forward and trust has been established, and as in a good way, trust has been established, and so folks tend to share a little bit more. And there's times when I very specifically use check-in questions that will dig a little deeper in terms of kind of how they're experiencing the semester, how are they doing at their internships, that can allow students to have an opportunity to be able to express some things that perhaps are difficult, but it also can be useful as a tool for assessment, because if you get the general sense that folks are really, really not doing well, then perhaps that will, set the tone for the next meeting, or for just kind of doing something very radical in terms of how to address the needs of the group in general. But yeah, in general, like I definitely feel like there should be, some kind of an emphasis on bringing your best energy to the group, and to really kind of do some self-reflection if you're consistently not able to bring that energy, because that perhaps means something, like a danger sign in terms of burnout. But yeah, and just lastly, like food, absolutely 100%. Like there should be no meeting if there's not food involved, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for those comments. And I think, yeah, when I think about working together joyfully on purpose, I don't literally mean like clicking on you, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't mean like that. I mean about the energy that you're sort of bringing into the space. And I absolutely agree with you that like sometimes you're having a meeting because like this was an emergency impromptu meeting because something happened, and we are coming together because we need to be responsive. And even showing up with a big old smile on your face doesn't feel appropriate for the situation, so I definitely like take that, and I understand what you're saying. I will say though that it is likely the work that was done before that impromptu meeting to build relationships with those folks that even allows you to feel comfortable showing up in your grief at that impromptu meeting. So to this point that Katie just put in the chat, like grief and joy, they operate together, right? They are family members. They are under the same roof. And if we're going to build trust and relationships with people so that we can work together on purpose through grief, we need to be building that capacity by working together on purpose joyfully, and really building those relationships and building those connections so that we can demonstrate care for one another when times are hard. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out though. I'm wondering if people have thoughts about, because you just gave us kind of your reflection on a bunch of different aspects of what we've talked about today. I'm wondering if others have like, thoughts, questions, reflections on working together joyfully on purpose, like more broadly, and the different key aspects we've talked about. Okay. Well, if not, I want to kind of wrap up our conversation today by saying a few words about conflict and a few more words about joy. So I'm gonna start with conflict because I don't know. We have been talking about working together joyfully. So conflict maybe is like the elephant in the room. Conflict is a natural and unavoidable part of working together. So when your goal is to work together joyfully on purpose, your focus should never be on avoiding conflict, right? Like instead, you should think about how to navigate group conflict and come out joyful on the other side of it. So I have a few insights on conflict that I want to share. These insights are both a mix of Dean Spade's thoughts and also my own. So I've got 5 of them. I'm just gonna say them. Okay, here we go. Thing number 1. Sometimes you just need to be quiet. This one is a tough pill for me to swallow. Sometimes you need to pause before responding and you need to gather your thoughts, right? Like sometimes a few deep breaths can be the difference between an argument and coming to a place of mutual understanding with a member of your group. Give yourself time to pause, breathe, and feel what's going on in your body before you respond automatically. My second insight on conflict. Sometimes it's not them, it's you. Sometimes it's not actually what someone said, but how what they said interacts with everything that we are or everything that we have been. So reflect on that, right? Like, and if it makes sense, maybe share about that experience with members of the group. Sharing that openness, honesty, vulnerability can help them to get to know you better and help you all to work better together. Number 3, give constructive feedback. So what you're saying to a group member, like if you are offering feedback to a group member, what you're saying should clearly communicate the issue and ways that they might address the issue. So bringing back up Howard's example earlier of the person who he felt was not a great facilitator, an example of feedback would be, hey, yo, you really got to work on those facilitation skills. What do you do with that? What exactly is the problem? What exactly do I do to address it? Constructive feedback in that situation might be, actually, I will ask you all, what would be an example of constructive feedback that you might give to someone if you don't think that they are doing a great job facilitating?
Well, I could take my example.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is a pain in the ass.
Okay.
He's a bully. He's nasty. But he's also wise in some ways and knowledgeable. And I'm not a confrontational person, but when I find a bully, I push back because then I'm put up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my life, I think I've had 3 public arguments with somebody. And they've all been with him during a meeting, and it was not the best thing to do. But what I have learned is that sometimes if he's criticized in a calm fashion, he'll listen, and he will, on occasion, admit that he was wrong. So I don't know if that, I'm just telling you my experience. I don't know that it's right or wrong, but that's just my reality. You know, he's founded this group and I founded a subsidiary of the group. So I have to defer to him even if he's full of it. But he will listen on occasion and will back down.
Yeah.
And I'm always ashamed of myself after he said some outrageous things that were just totally wrong.
Mhm.
Years later, he remembers all these things and he will apologize. I've been dealing with him for about 5 years. But anyway, that's my reality.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about this person that you've described, and it sounds like this is a difficult relationship to navigate, but thinking about this person that you described and the way that they show up in their meeting facilitation capacity, if I was trying to give them constructive feedback, I feel like I might, after the meeting in a sort of one-on-one type of setting, I might say, hey, when so-and-so said XYZ in the meeting, I feel like your response to them was like a bit abrasive. And I noticed that because after you said that, they really didn't speak again for the rest of the meeting. So I think that the way that you responded might have come across kind of harsh to them. And so I'm saying this to you because I'm wondering if, in the next meeting or the next time you facilitate, if that situation comes up again, maybe instead of responding the way that you did, you could consider saying XYZ or responding in this way, or maybe passing the responsibility to respond off to someone else. Like you can tag me in
I
instead of
really took to heart what you said. I wish you had put it on a slide about realizing that we're not automatically always right. And sometimes the smart thing is not to say something, to bide your time, take a breath. And I feel like you should send me a bill for therapy here.
That's hilarious.
Well, it's a problem because now we had a good session last night. There was something that appeared in the Washington Post last Friday that was relevant, and we were able to all agree that we disagreed with what he was the former head of the National Institutes of Health, and he was writing about his close encounter with prostate cancer, but we felt like he blew it. Like he's stepping out now in the Washington Post and saying, I'm here and this is what I think. But he also says that he was diagnosed 5 years ago. And so my reaction is, if why did it take you 5 years to come out of the closet? You had to wait till it got really serious or what? And I have very low risk disease. This other guy I'm dealing with is advanced disease. And last night, we all agreed that we were going to write a letter to the Washington Post. And so we got that done today. So sometimes if you can find common ground, you can kind of put up with some of the BS.
Absolutely. Common ground is essential. I have 2 more insights about conflict. So the 4th insight that I want to share is if you have something to say to someone, say it to their face. This is high school stuff, you all. But I will say, make sure that the thing you have to say to them isn't mocking them, it isn't cruel, and it isn't unnecessarily critical. But if you have an issue with someone, or if you have something that you need to address, take it to them. Don't take it to other folks in the group. Take it directly to that person. And then my final insight.
So I shouldn't be bitching to you here.
That's hilarious. I'm not in the group, so I guess this doesn't quite count. But when I say this, what I really mean is, don't, if there's a group of 6 people and you've got an issue with one person, don't go to the other 4 people and be like, I have an issue with so and so. Those are the type of interactions that really allow intergroup conflict to fester, because now you're talking about people behind their back, and then you can get telephone going where it's like, well, they said that you said that. Say it to their face. Be direct about it. If you have a thing to say say it to their face. This is like my life philosophy. I feel so strongly about this in interpersonal relationships and especially in groups. And then my final insight on conflict is communicate clearly, directly, honestly, and concisely. I think that oftentimes we're nervous to have what feels like difficult conversations, but I can promise you that it will feel better to you and the person you're talking to just kind of say the thing, rip the Band-Aid off, than to be indirect, beating around the bush about it. Now it's awkward. They don't really get what you said or what you meant. Clear, direct, honest, concise. And again, making sure that what you're saying is not mocking, it's not cruel, it's not unnecessarily critical. It is just clear, direct, honest, and concise. Yes, conflict. And now I would like to end with joy. The thing that I have to say here is that working together joyfully is a choice. It is an active choice that I believe we must make because our socio-political environment does not make it easy for us. The topics that we will likely come together to work on are often deep and heavy. The work that we have to do together can feel so urgent. So for me, when faced with a reality like that, I see no other option than to turn to joy. Everything I talked about today was focused on how we can work together joyfully on purpose. But one important point that I want to make before I end is that working together joyfully on purpose requires a bunch of joyful individuals. So you need to prioritize your joy in order to be in joyful community. This is a little bit of storytelling time. Something that I started doing a few years ago was really being intentional about starting each day doing things that bring me joy. So my morning routine includes waking up, putting on sunscreen. Shout out to all the Black and brown girls here. We do need sunscreen. Journaling, going to the gym and dancing, rapping at the gym, taking my dog on a walk, and then taking a shower, putting on a cute outfit. And then I realized when I start my day like that, I am a ray of sunshine in every meeting that I enter that day. I call that my daily joy routine. Like that is like my, I don't even want to say armor, but it's almost like my armor that I put on before I go into my work day. And that replenishes me and it allows me to be in a mental space where if someone says something to me that kind of rubs me the wrong way, I don't just react. I'm like able to take a deep breath and reflect before I respond. It just puts me in a more like calm kind of space. So I'm wondering, I share with you all my daily joy routine. I'm wondering what you all do to promote your joy. You can put it in the chat or you can come off mute to share. What does joy look like for you all? Okay, dancing like no one's watching. I feel that. Okay, yoga. Walking in the woods, bird watching, nature walks. Walks at the beach, reading, yes. Sitting outside with my dog. Thank you all for sharing in the chat and you can keep it going. I like to start my day with prayer, music, and Bible reading. So boosting your personal joy looks different to everybody, as you can see, as evidenced by what has been shared in the chat. And it might take you some time to figure out what works best for you. I just put in the chat some ideas if you will find yourself on the hunt for ideas of ways that you can boost your joy. These are just some thoughts, and I'm sorry, Sylvia, that I didn't send these to you in advance so that you could translate them. I apologize. But yeah, I wanted to just leave you all with that list. And that is all that I have today. I want to thank you all for your participation. I want to thank you all for listening. We've got like not that many minutes left, so maybe we can have a bit more discussion, or maybe we'll break into the like registered student only portion. I'm not really sure. Not thanks for the therapy. You're welcome, Howard. I'm here to help out. I am not a licensed therapist, but
But you play one on the internet.
right. This advice that you have received today should not be considered a replacement of your licensed therapist or whatever disclaimer they give on like podcasts and everything. But okay, yeah. Can we stop the recording? I'm always so awkward about recordings, Emily. Oh my goodness.